Kansas requirement to prove citizenship in order to vote goes on trial. The judge delivers a stinging slap on the wrist to the law's architect and chief defender, Secretary of State Chris Kobach. Students marching out of class from Kansas City to Hays, Kansas, demanding their voices be heard. What is it they want to say? And are lawmakers listening? And $2 billion. That's what a Republican-ordered study of Kansas public schools says we need to achieve a 95% graduation rate. Can Kansas afford the price tag? What happens if the state doesn't find more money in time to meet a court-ordered deadline? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. Most expected a study ordered this year by Republican leadership to come back saying schools need to be more efficient in their handling of state funds. Instead, the study determined Kansas needs to add millions, even billions of dollars to the pot to properly educate your child. State House reporter Courtney Ryan from our news partners at KSN TV explains.
Inside this packed room, lawmakers listened as two out-of-state consultants explained their school finance report.
Clearly, Kansas schools are using dollars well, given what they're tasked to do with.
The report released Friday showed it could cost up to $2 billion to properly fund schools.
I think it was helpful to understand, to get the explanation so we can better understand what our numbers mean. And she gave us some information on how we could scale things in over time.
The report is tied to performance benchmarks, and increasing the state's high school graduation rate from 86% to 95% could cost the most.
This is a very big number, but it would also be paying for a very big change in improvement.
According to the consultants, the high-end price tag for a 90% graduation rate would be $1.6 billion.
I think the 90% is a more realistic goal, and I think that's something that might be more affordable.
Consultants also suggested phasing in the money over multiple years, but said there does need to be a catch-up period of additional funding for the state to get back on track.
Following that period of catching up, a long-term strategy to maintain your levels of investment.
Democratic leadership says they're hoping to work with Republicans to find a solution.
And we would like to thank our news partners at KSN TV for that report from Courtney Ryan, their State House reporter, here to help us get an idea of where the debate over school funding is headed. In Topeka, we have Dr. Representative, many titles, Yikes. Brandon Whipple, Democrat from Wichita. And as we've talked about before, when we have lawmakers on, we try to have one from each side. Unfortunately, John Whitmer was supposed to join us, had a death that he needed to go and help that family out, couldn't be here with us. And Diane Leffler from the Wichita Eagle very willingly is pinch hitting for us. So we appreciate your last minute joining of the crew today. Let's start off. This was a surprise. Nobody was expecting this result from this study. What was the shockwave like as it went through the State House as these numbers started coming out?
You know, I'll tell you, shockwave is a really good way to describe it. That morning, we were in what we call caucus, when the Democrats come and meet. And really, we were skeptical when it came to this out-of-state person who was going to just kind of swoop into Kansas and do a study. So we were a little skeptical about if there was political motives behind this. And I'll tell you, and I'm not a lawyer, but I joke I play one when I'm in a legislature. But my understanding is when you call a witness, you assume the witness is going to support your case. Keep in mind, the lawyer for the Senate is a former senator who has a voting record of voting for cutting schools. So it is reasonable to believe that his witness might have been someone they thought would agree with them by saying, hey, schools are overly funded or they need to be more efficient or whatever the talking points are on the Republican side right now. And not all Republicans, but particularly where his brand, I think, comes from. So when a study came out, it actually showed really, and I don't want to sound like this, but it shows really what we've been saying all along. If you want better results for education, you need to fund education in order to get those results. But the study also, it gave us numbers that, it kind of gave us 3 tiers. In the top tier, which of course we all want, the most students graduated out of our communities as possible. There's never been a worse time in our history to not have good educational credentials, because today we're not just competing with Missouri, we're not just competing with Oklahoma and Nebraska for jobs. We're in a global economy. So we want more students to graduate high school. We want them to be prepared for the next round of education, whether it's tech school or college. But her numbers on what it would take to get there, they were eye-opening. We're talking millions to billions of dollars over the next few years. So even those people who knew that we need to fund education at a higher level, and those people who tried to do that last year and we were shut down, even those people, I think, were a little surprised with what the higher tier that she recommended was. The lower to mid tier was actually very similar to what we called the Trimmer Amendment on the House floor, where Representative Ed Trimmer, who is a teacher, or I think a retired teacher, probably one of the smartest people on education, on the education committee we have, and he's from our area. It's great that he's there, every day working on this. Well, he had the amendment to bring it constitutionally up to standards, and I don't, hopefully that will come back up.
Yeah. Well, and talking about the surprise of those numbers, Diana, you and I have followed this case for years.
Longer than I like to think about.
Yeah, this particular case for years. The issue itself has gone on for decades, as we've talked about before on this show. Yes. But the numbers really floored me. That $400 million, which is that lower tier that they talked about, that was just to maintain when we're at. That wasn't even to improve graduation rates. That's just to keep what we've got going. The top tier, $2 billion to get to that 95% graduation rate. And Dr. Watson, the head of, or the education commissioner here in Kansas, he was like, we're not moving off of that. We need that for many of the reasons that you said: global economy, you need a high school diploma to get a decent job. He's like, we're not moving away from that 95% goal. Those numbers floored me. And honestly, from the reporting we've done, does Kansas have it?
Kansas has it if it wants to have it. I mean, really, when we talk about government funding, we're talking about priorities, and we're talking about how much we're going to tax. So yes, it is an achievable goal for Kansas to do if that's what they decide they want to do.
No.
Now, they may decide they don't want to do that, and I suspect that probably the final result is going to be somewhere between that $400 million minimum and that $2 billion maximum. But this is, I mean, as you mentioned, we have covered this now for years and years and years, and this is coming to a head. This, I believe, is the turning point where we are going to see some actual action take place. The legal process is pretty much exhausted, and one of the fallback positions I'm seeing on the part of some Republican leaders is now they've sort of retreated into that. Well, the Supreme Court can't tell us what to do, and that's a result of they hired a consultant who seemed to be the most likely person to tell them what they wanted to hear, which was that we could improve our schools through greater efficiency without putting much more money into them. And the message came back that no, really, according to this expert, according to the experts that have been studying this for the last 30 years, you got to put more money in. Mm-hmm. So this is a watershed moment, I think.
Yeah, very much so. And talking about the court case, April 30th. Next week is last week for the regular session. You and I were talking about that earlier. Nothing's going to happen by then.
Last time I was on this show, I said legislators are a lot like high school students. You got to give them a deadline, and that's when it gets stuff done. I'll tell you, Monday we have the list of bills that are going to work on the floor. We have 10 bills, the most we've had so far. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get kind of the lower hanging items, if you will, out of the way and we can fully focus on education. But to Dion's point, I read something earlier that I think this has been going on since 2010 is when this case was filed.
This particular leg of the case.
Yes, which is disturbing to think about because of what all the studies have shown, and is that we have been undercutting education, which means we have students who has spent the majority of their time in our schools who have not been receiving the resources they need to get the most out of those classrooms, and that's really a shame, because those students will never get third grade back. They'll never get fourth grade back, and our teachers, I think, are doing a great job with the resources they have, and they deserve to have the resources they need in order to prepare our Kansas kids for the next global economy.
Well, and one thing that strikes me about this whole situation is you mentioned that this has gone on since 2010, but what really this case is about is the legislature failing to comply with its settled agreement to the previous case.
Yeah.
So really, yes, it's two different cases, but really there's a continuum there. So it goes back even farther than you're thinking.
And there are many who in education who will argue that this year's graduating class, their entire education career from the time they were in kindergarten on has been overshadowed by school funding lawsuits. And, as my son is one of those graduating seniors this year, it's kind of one of those that hits home for me.
Of course.
As I sit there and I think about what could have been different about his education, we won't know.
Well, Brandon and his colleagues are very good at solving problems at like 4:30, 5 in the morning. So I'm kind of expecting that this will get some attention.
Yeah.
Many people in this state are saying, "Why have we waited so long?" They knew this was coming,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Like I said, we need deadlines, and it will be, hopefully this week we'll see a lot of traction on it and be able to. By next week, you have something else to report on that we have progress. So we're hoping we'll get to work.
And if not next week, then there's the veto session. And as we have all experienced, well, it's only supposed to be a couple of days. Who knows how long it will last? Well, students are having their say about a lot of things, not just school funding. Just before spring break, thousands of Kansas students joined others nationwide in a school walkout. Now there's talk of more walkouts as students begin to feel their power as citizens. 1 month after a shooter took the lives of 17 students and teachers at a Parkland, Florida high school, students across the nation walked out of class for 17 minutes. Their point, to memorialize those lost and to demand changes in gun control laws at the state and national level. Here in Kansas, many of the students faced detentions and suspensions for their actions, depending on their district, but marched anyway. Now, some plan a trip to Topeka in April to carry their message to lawmakers. And it doesn't end with gun control. The Associated Press reports students at a California high school are now planning a walkout to protest abortion, demanding a change in the laws there. And that's something that's really kind of stuck out to me as I've been back in the classroom teaching high schoolers this year, is that these kids are so politically aware. I think back to when I was in high school and the kids, I was politically aware because I was raised in a newsroom. My mom was a newspaper reporter, editor, columnist. I was raised paying attention to politics. But my classmates, so many of them really weren't. They were very politically naive. And yet, as I talk to my students and I listen to my students, they're very astute. They're listening, they're paying attention, they know what's going on. You look at this from lawmakers' point of view, is this a change? Are students starting to step up and say, it's our turn?
To be honest, I think this has been happening for a long time. I'm someone who has been seen as a younger person in the legislature, and I got involved in politics early on. And I'll tell you, with social media, which has been around for a long time now, relatively speaking, we're seeing more access to information than other generations have had. So when something happens in the world, maybe other generations had to go look it up or watch the nightly news. You now see it on your Facebook wall. You see your friends engaging with it, which makes you want to engage with it. So I think that it's a good thing that the next generation is becoming much more politically engaged and much more aware of what's going on, and they got the tools to do it. And not only do they have the tools to read this stuff and absorb it, but also the tools to put out their own opinions about it.
Well, and you bring up some very interesting points, social media. And Diane, you and I both, we started our broadcasting careers before social media existed. I shouldn't say our news careers, as you're now with the Wichita Eagle. But I have noticed over the last few years, as I have been live tweeting events, covering school board meetings, covering State House, that it's my State House, the hashtag KSLedge, that gets most reaction, and it really is from the younger generation that's paying attention. It's not, as a news director once told me, a bunch of old fogies that are paying attention to politics. It's the younger ones. It's 18-year-olds to 30-year-old range. Are you seeing the same thing?
Well, yeah, I am, and it's funny because it cycles. And the reason that it cycles is because there are different threats at different times. I'm a little bit older than you, and my generation was very politically active. We had Vietnam, we had Nixon, we had things going on, and so people, students were in the streets then too.
Yeah.
And then we had a relative period of fairly placid governance, and now we are back into a situation where young people are feeling threatened, and they're feeling threatened by these particular types of weapons that are being used in mass shootings at schools. So it's it's a catalyst for them, and they're walking out.
And if I could, I do want to just mention, particularly this week, where this goes beyond social media with this generation, and and I'm very proud of this generation from stepping up and stepping out. And I told you when we were off the air, there was a representative, Representative Horn from Lawrence. She's a younger representative, and 2 days this week, there was a high school student who was on spring break and asked to shadow her, and shadowed her at the legislature and on the floor. And the very next day, there was a college student who's also on spring break who did the same thing, another young woman. Yeah. And so that really resonates with me, where this isn't just people posting online, but people who are willing to figure out who their representative is, or who a representative is who they feel comfortable shadowing, reaching out to that person, and then showing up to the state legislature to learn the process firsthand. And that's something I think is great.
And as we talk about this and the kids becoming more involved and paying more attention and wanting to have their say, do you get the sense, either one of you, that lawmakers are taking students seriously? I know in other states there have been complaints that lawmakers are not taking the next generation seriously. Are they being taken seriously here in Kansas? Brandon?
They should be. They should be. We have right now, and we have a slew of candidates who are teenagers who want to run for governor, and they kind of get chuckled at and laughed at on the legislature on the floor, but then they pass a law out of the House that said this couldn't happen in the future. So they were taken seriously enough to change the law. Wow. And when I spoke against the bill, my argument isn't that we're going to get a teenager elected and now we have someone without credentials in the State House. My argument is these teenagers are using this as a platform to voice their issues and their concern, and they should be taken seriously. Yeah. We should be encouraging more young people to come forward and tell us the type of world that they want to see us help create for them.
Diane, what are you saying?
What I think is, the legislature is a behemoth. It's a leviathan, and things have been done a certain way there for a very long time, and to move that, to change that momentum is going to take an extraordinary effort. Whether these teenagers can stay involved long enough, whether they can convince enough people who are not teenagers to their point of view, because that's really what they have to do. They have to. And
that comes down to voting.
Well, it comes down to voting, and it comes down to pressure. There's a lot of pressure on legislators. I think you'll agree, from people who are strong Second Amendment supporters, who believe that, pretty much any gun should be allowed and that any interference with that is a violation of the Constitution. Yeah. They have a loud and strong voice in this legislature.
Well, and one thing we do know, and only time will tell if that trend continues, is that according to Pew, I was looking these numbers up, is that millennials, their voting, the percentage voting increased 3% from 2012 to 2016. We'll have to see if that continues in 2018, 2020. And voting, one of the things you got to do in order to vote is register. And at question over the last few weeks is Kansas voter registration law constitutional? That's been on trial over the last couple of weeks in federal court. While we're still waiting for the judge's ruling on the overall case, we do know the judge was very unhappy with the conduct of Kansas Secretary of State throughout the case. Chris Kobach went back to court this month to defend a law he designed requiring Kansans to prove their citizenship rather than just swear they are a citizen in order to register to vote. The American Civil Liberties Union argues the law makes it too hard to register for many in already marginalized communities, the poor, minorities, the elderly. The question: could Kobach prove there is rampant voter fraud, enough to warrant the extra precautions? While we await the judge's decision, we do know the judge is very unhappy with the Secretary of State's behavior during the course of the lawsuit. The Casey Star reports she scolded Kobach for violating a court order by not properly informing voters who registered under less strict federal rules that they could still vote in Kansas elections. The Star says she pounded her desk with her hand as she told him, "I made it clear they're fully registered voters." And of course, all of that was a temporary injunction that was in place throughout the time this case is being adjudicated, that at least for now, until we decide otherwise, they're fully registered. And I know during the last election, 2016 election, there were problems with the way it was stated on the website. There were problems with postcard notifications going out to those who had registered through the federal system instead of the state system. And that's a lot of what that contempt hearing against Kobach was about. Diane, I'm going to start with you on this one. As we look at that case, there are political ramifications for that case, not just for voting, but also for Kobach himself.
Well, I think that the ramifications of the case are, I disagree with you a little bit there, because I do think it's about voting. I think it's about that sacred right that we have as American citizens to cast our ballot for the people that we want to lead us. And Chris Kobach has lost at multiple levels defending this law.
Well, and he even said, based on the questions during this particular portion of the case, that he doesn't expect to come out the winner this time either.
No, and he's hoping for an appeals court, but the last time he went to that same appeals court, they said no. So I really, it just is so, even the identification requirements themselves are getting harder. My son is trying to get a passport right now, and they won't accept the birth certificate that California gave us when he was born. He has to send off for a whole nother birth certificate, the long form. And it's getting harder and harder, and the more obstacles you put in people's way, the more difficult it's going to be to maintain democracy. And I think that's what this case is about.
And I'll agree. I think, and Diane, you might have updated numbers for me, but I think he's found maybe 3 people who voted what he believes is illegally, which voted in 2 states or voted twice.
It was more than that. I think it's roughly a dozen, but.
Okay, and so you take that number, and his argument is democracy is at risk because there's maybe up to a dozen people voted by mail, forgot, and then voted at that day at the poll as well. And then the last number we had before we purged it was 33,000 people who were citizens, who we knew were citizens, who registered to vote at the DMV and were wiped clean off the list. And I think that people like me will look at that and say democracy is at risk when you take 30,000+ Kansans and you tell them they can't vote because they didn't have a particular form on them when they registered at the DMV.
Well, the cases we've had so far have been cases where people either misunderstood the law or simply forgot and made a mistake.
No.
And, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't some people who are not entitled to vote who are voting. But there needs to be some way to winnow those people out of the process without creating a barrier that prevents the legitimate voter from being able to vote just because they don't have the money or they don't have the time to be able to acquire these documents that, you know, in the case of people who were born out of this state, are not easy to get.
Yeah. Well, and one thing as we look at all of this is Kobach is, of course, by many considered the leading contender for the Republican nomination for governor here in Kansas. Does losing on this front, which has been one of his main issues for the last several years, hurt his chances or help?
Yeah, and I'll jump in for this one. Being a governor isn't about being an ideologue. It is about making the trains run on time. That's why the state is in the situation it is now, is because we had a very ideological governor. Kobach goes and says, hey, I am the ideological candidate. What this case is showing is he had to go send out postcards. Postcards is all we needed you to do to remind these people they could vote, and he didn't do that.
So his argument in court was that, well, it's because I told each of the counties to do it, not all of them did it.
The buck should stop with him. Leaders share all the credit, they take all the blame. For him to even do that makes me question, if he is governor, will the trains run on time?
And I don't know, you know, I don't know if this is going to affect his campaign or not. I suspect not. The people who are most inclined to vote for Chris Kobach are probably people who agree with him on the issues of immigration and on the issues of alleged voter fraud. So I'm not sure that this hurts him.
No. All right, and we're going to have to let that be the last word, as always happens on the show. We've run out of time. Brandon, Diane, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate your input and everything you had to say. Hope to see you both here again soon. And thank you as well. I really love the fact that you join us on a regular basis. If you have questions or suggestions for topics to be discussed on Kansas Week, reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook. Just look for KPTS Channel 8 or Pilar Pedraza TV. For now, have a great week.